we're trying to understand what our relationship is with Christ, it's really important that we understand a concept that's called the spousal analogy. When you look at the Bible, there's a lot of different ways that God uses to describe his reality with us. Okay? But the one that appears most often, the one he uses the most, is the analogy of marriage. Marriage appears all the time, and in some sense we can look at it as being, in some sense, the perfect analogy. All analogies, at some case, aren't perfect. I mean, at some point the analogy breaks down, otherwise it wouldn't be an analogy. But nonetheless, if we want to look at the analogy that most perfectly describes our relationship to God, we should look at the analogy of marriage. When it talks about in the Old Testament about how God marries Israel, as the young man marries the virgin, so the Lord shall marry you, Israel. You look at the New Testament. It talks about in Ephesians chapter 5. At the end of it talks about how the husband and the wife are an image of Christ in the church in this mystery. So if we really want to understand how it is God relates to us, we need to understand what marriage is and how to live that out. So what is the defining feature of marriage, of the spousal relationship? Well, it's sex. It's the husband and wife becoming one flesh, becoming one. We see that at the very beginning of the Bible, where in Genesis chapter 2, where it talks about how with Adam and Eve, how man will leave his father and his mother, cleave to his wife, and the two shall become one flesh. This same passage is quoted several times in the New Testament. First by Matthew when in the question about divorce, and he appeals to the beginning. Don't you remember in the beginning how God made man and woman, made man male and female, and what God's put together, no man should tear apart. And then of course Paul again makes an appeal to this in the beginning. In Ephesians chapter 5. So this union is the defining feature of what makes marriage marriage. There's other parts around that are very important, but the defining thing that makes it what it is the union of man and woman in sex. Now, of course, Ephesians chapter 5 is that controversial passage, if I can use that word, where it talks about wives being submissive to their husbands. Controversial, sure. Most people tend to miss the point where it says, husbands, love your wives as Christ loved the church, and of course Christ died on the cross. Sometimes you have to wonder who got the worst end of that deal. In fact, they're kind of both suck in some sense. You gotta be submissive, but you gotta die on the cross. Like, boy, marriage kind of sucks. And if I'm talking to many of my married friends, you know that there are a lot of trials and tribulations in marriage. But the ones that are successful are really the ones that take this into account, where the man makes the effort to die to himself so that his wife can be holy and pure. That's what Ephesians tells you. The man doesn't look to his own needs, he looks to his wife's needs first. Because he's genuinely desiring her good, she has no problem following his lead because, heck, his lead is totally oriented toward her well-being. If his lead was not, yes, then there's a problem. And of course, I also want to be very careful about this in the sense that this doesn't necessarily fit into every aspect of their lives. Like, I've worked with many couples who have run a small business together, and you don't see this kind of dynamic in their business, and it shouldn't be in their business. Some elements are visible in that relationship, but it's not the primary element in that relationship. Really, and trying to figure out how to live that out, I think, is the vocation of married couples. But nonetheless, within the context of what makes their marriage a marriage, this idea where the man initiates by denying his own needs, dying to himself, and trying to find out what it is that makes his wife happy, and then the wife, following his lead because she knows he's doing everything he possibly can to make her happy. In some sense, that's the key to, living out this spousal relationship in a way that images the way that shows us how Christ loves us in the church, and images how we're supposed to follow Christ. Because, of course, in following Christ, we are in the place of the wife, the place of the woman. We can speak of woman as being, in the relationship of marriage, as being the archetype of man, because how do we understand how to relate to Christ? In this perfect idea of what they're talking about in Ephesians, we come to understand what it is. We understand how it is we're supposed to relate to Christ. Now, what does dance have to do with that? Well, obviously, I think a lot, but I think it's pretty obvious when you think about it. Just on the surface, you can see there's a man and woman in dance. just like there is in marriage. And in some sense, the two do become one. Look at a dance. And partner dancing is a lead fellow activity where there's one will on the dance floor, not the man's will, or even since the woman's will, it's their will. And I'll get back to that in a second. But the two do become one. I think for me, one of the most interesting things I ever heard was when I went to hear a theology talk, a theology of the body talk by Father Thomas Loya. And he works as a marriage counselor too, and he explains, when he's counseling couples, he says, you have to understand that the two needs that you each bring to the table. For men, the man's need in any relationship is, am I good enough? Do I measure up to your expectations? For the woman, the woman's biggest need is, are you there for me? Does she feel safe? And once she feels safe, then she can start to feel sexy and beautiful. But the first thing she needs to know is that he's going to be there for her. And I went to within 2 weeks of that, I also went to a dance workshop, which we talked about the needs of dancers coming into a relationship. They were the exact same needs on the dance floor. For the guy, it's very important for the guy on the dance floor to measure up. Conversely, for the woman, her biggest need, first of all, is to make sure that she feels safe. She needs to know that the guy's not going to go too far in the dance, that he's going to not jerk her around, that he's going to be respectful, that's going to keep her safe on the dance floor. And once she knows all those things, then she opens up more and can feel beautiful and attractive. So they're bringing the same exact needs into a dance that couples are bringing into the romantic relationship. So going back to whose will is it? Initially, looking at the fact that the man is the lead and the woman is the follow, we'd naturally assume that it's the man's will that's being followed. But we realize that the whole point, with the man offers the lead because he's trying to make the woman happy. The lead is his gift to her. The lead is him saying, I'm giving you my attention because I'm here to be around you, to guide you, to protect you in some sense. Kind of a part in a play like in the marriage. Okay. But nonetheless, he's there. The lead is his gift. And by the fact that he offers the lead, the woman knows that she has his attention, that he finds her attractive, that she is loved, and therefore she freely accepts that gift and follows it. And then having done it once, the man doesn't stop and say, okay, I'm done, you dance for me now and make me happy. No, he continues to give her lead after lead after lead after lead, which really is gift after gift after gift after gift. And the woman receives and follows. Okay, so and this really mirrors, if you read any book on relationships, whether religious or secular, it explains, that in any romantic relationship, the man, even after marriage, needs to keep pursuing the woman, needs to keep, initiating the relationship. If he doesn't do this, it breaks down. And so, in the same sense as a dancer, as a lead, as I constantly initiate relationship and she receives and follows, and that continues the cycle, that's the same kind of cycle we should see in a romantic relationship. And then conversely, we bring that to the idea of God. Who is it that's in the Christian worldview? It's not so much man seeking God, but God seeking man. And God initiates the relationship with man in Christianity, and man responds to God's generous gift. So, of course, again, going back to it, in our relationship with Christ, we all take the place of woman in marriage or in the dance, that we're following Christ. And so we have to be open to his gift to us and to receive it humbly and gratefully and follow him. And in some sense, in a very real sense, what does we want in our relationship with God? How is our need met? What does we want from God? God, are you there? Are you paying attention to me? Are you there for me? That's God. That is man's need from God. Are you there for me? And so that's why we can speak of woman as the archetype of man, because the woman's question to man is, are you there for me? The follow's question to the lead, are you there for me? They're all the same question.